All right, let's take this video for the SUV conversion to make this a little bit easier. Hopefully this will help somebody else. This idea came from Kevin Young. He had a ton of extra parts laying around. He does a lot of jet ski builds and parts sales and stuff here in the Spring, Texas, Houston area. So he figured out that you can use, instead of modifying your, this is for an SUV conversion to 4-stroke using either the MR1 VX110 motor, the FX140, or the FX high output, all MR1, not the 1.8 liter non-supercharged or supercharged. This won't work on the 1.8 liters for this setup. So he found that a 2001, and I think other years you just cross-reference the year parts for the different years for the XL, the 2001 XL 800 water box, combined with, this is from a Sea-Doo, so I can't remember, it's a 2-stroke Sea-Doo. These parts are super cheap on eBay, like 20 bucks delivered or something like that. I think I paid 25 bucks plus $5 shipping on this. This combo was cheap compared to having custom welding done on your FXHO or your FX140 or your VX exhaust manifold, exhaust pipe. So what he found out is that you can actually take this, hook it up to this front nipple. This goes forward in the boat, and this adapts into the exhaust on these very well. So I'm gonna try to mock that up a little bit real quick. All right, so I don't know the exact angle that's gonna go on here just yet, but as you see, this thing fits super snug. You get your bulge on there, and then you worm clamp it around this neck right here, and then this size transitions to this end on your exhaust. So let me see if I can throw this all into the hull and kind of simulate mock it up for you. All right, so for the first step of this, you can see how that XL 800 water box fits really, really nicely coming out of the stock hole. And it fits really, really nicely back into here. It will really secure down well. Rotate it just a little. I'm not sure of of all these exact angles yet on this, but it'll probably end up riding really close to about that. And it sticks out nice. Hang on. Okay, and then we get our what do you call this? Our pipe on there to attach to our muffler. Let me throw an exhaust down there and try to figure out the angle real quick. Let me step back a peg here, and if you happen to have access to a buddy or parts, here's another really, really handy thing that you can do if you're doing the MR1 conversion using any of those 3 motors, VX, FX140, FXHO. Take your SUV motor mounts, because that's the ones that you're going to need. You take your VXFX, whatever, your VXFX rear end. You don't need the oil pump or the oil reservoir on there. Try to keep this as light as you can. Your crankshaft, if you happen to have a damaged one, you can throw in there. You don't need the magneto at all. So you could really strip this down and get this as light as you can. You do want to have at least a bearing on the front bottom and the front bottom and the back bottom main journals, just so you get your everything level. This thing does have to slide in. Ideally, you'd want to have that on there. But anyway, so what I do is, so basically this doesn't turn anything, but it's in the right place, so everything should mock up. With your motor mounts, so there's an issue that people are having, and they're having to cut out this hump and this hump, and then re-fiberglass that, and then even cut out just a tiny little, like a notch. I think it might be on this side of the string, just a little notch. Totally unnecessary. So the reason this is happening is because there is the ability to squat these a little bit, and it's due to where they're locking these down when they're putting their motor in. They're not considering that is your motor mount perfectly on center. The hole that this motor mount bolt goes through is quite large, so this thing wobbles around in there. That's why you have to crank it down. So either their bolt is off center this way, or it's off center this way too much. And depending on what kind of shim material they're using down here for their motor mounts, or if they're putting shims in here, all this is making it ride too low. So if it's riding too low in the hull, if you can imagine, let's see, the further out you go, the more this motor is going to squat. The further in you go, the motor is going to rise up. So you can actually control the height of this through just this little bit of a leeway that you have in your motor mounts here. So if you're finding that you're bottoming out and your motor's rocking in there, just pull your motor mounts in as far as you can, or at least to the middle. What I did is I tried to mark center on the hole, and then across your actual motor mount, I marked the same lines and try to match them up. Anyway, it's all about this thing just squatting up or squatting down based on how far out you mount your motor mounts. So right now I've got mine at the absolute extreme right now, which is going to make this motor squat, which should make this motor either bottom out or come really close to bottoming out. But what I'm doing is what a lot of us do is I'm creating a rail system. So you got your old motor mount locations, let's say like here, right? You got the aluminum bar here, and down here submerged inside of the fiberglass stringer itself. So what we do is we're going to take, here's where your new motor mount location is. You can see it's kind of basically traced out. Traced out, it's way, I think we're probably, what is that? 8 inches almost forward of the old location. Instead of reinventing the wheel and digging this out, putting it there, re-glassing it in, completely unnecessary. Reuse this old motor mount location. Take an aluminum L bracket or a stainless steel if you prefer. Longevity, sure. Saltwater, sure. Freshwater, don't even bother with stainless steel. It's unnecessary. 3/16 of an inch thick material. If you're doing an L bracket, it's going to be 3/16 that way, 3/16 up, right? You can always trim off a bunch of that vertical if it's bumping into anything, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. It depends on how high you buy. Ideally, you get a 1 inch up and a 3 inch left to right. Anyway, so we're going to drill some holes in the actual rail. That's going to be like, I think it ends up being like 27 inches long or something like that. So it goes way back, and you're just going to drill a hole through exactly where that motor mount location is, and you're going to hard bolt that rail down in 2 positions here, and it's going to capture 1 position back here as well, I believe. That's unused by the new motor mount locations. So what do I want to say about that? So anyway, the 3/16 inch thickness seems to be a good thickness for dirt or for stability, but also that becomes your shim. Instead of having these shims in here, that becomes your shim. So you'll have to do an alignment, make sure everything's good. If you're too high, say on the front, remember you can always move these motor mounts outward to shim it down versus actually putting in shims. So you can use that 3/16 inch thickness as your baseline, and just, if your motor mounts aren't bottomed out, or you can drop it, you can bring it out to drop it, bring them in to rise it, so that when you do your check back here eventually, so that you have a nice, smooth, even transition as per the specs in the manual. Another thing while I'm in here, you see my mid-shaft bearing housing is standing off the wall. These were manufactured by WFO Performance here in Houston, Texas. Richard down there, his brother mills these out, I believe. So these are aluminum 2-inch long pegs. There's other ways that people have as a workaround around this. I ain't gonna go into detail, but the gist of it is you need to be standing off 2 inches off of your mid wall so that you can push your motor forward, so that you have full access, number one, to your oil fill cap. Number two, it brings some weight forward, whereas ideally it is ideal to have it. What else? And I can't remember offhand here. I think this is what prevents you from having to, So moving it 2 inches forward allows you to remove a 2-inch spacer that's on the back of the FXHO and the FX140 jet pump. It's a 2-inch spacer. It looks like a short, a thin wear ring basically. Get rid of that entirely so that your pump is shorter in the back, so that you don't need to extend all three of your cables. You'll have to extend your reverse cable, your steering cable, and your trim cable if you do not do this. So it's kind of an either or thing, really. The biggest advantage to me is that your oil fill cap is completely revealed here instead of it being tucked in a little bit, which causes you to have to cut out a little bit of this. No big deal, but anyway, that's what happens there. All right, so we got our motor lowered down in there. It's easy enough, unless you're a complete weak fuck, to lower that in yourself without breaking your back. So we've got our little rubber dampener in here. Now we're gonna center the motor. Just pull this exhaust boot out of the way a little bit so I can center this thing, get it where I want it. All right, so that is close to centered where it needs to be. And as you'll notice, I have no shimming in, of course. I don't have my rail system in there. But what I did is I just moved these couplers around until the rear coupler is basically 90 degrees to the hull. Okay, so we're close there, and I'm checking to see if my motor coupler outer edge matches up to that. There's a little bit off, but somewhere in here it matches up, so it's close. And then do the same on the other side, spin it around so you get a 90-degree surface over there. Okay, now I know that the back end anyway is pretty reasonably lined up left to right. What I don't know is if the motor on the front side is lined up left to right. So all I could really do is take a look at the old motor mount locations and run a line through the holes all the way to the front and just kind of see where these motor mounts end up falling in line. So the rear, you can see, are off of my line, but remember, I'm pushed all the way to the outside. If I pulled this in, I would fall right on that line. So additionally, if I push that motor mount in by loosening that bolt and did the same on that one, I would get my coupler would rise up. You can see right now if I put these two in, I'm a 1/4 inch off right now. So my rail system is 3/16 of an inch tall, plus I want to pull my motor mounts in just a little bit, and I want to get all this stuff nice and squared off all the way around before I commit to where my final motor mount locations are going to be. For the purposes of this video, I'm digressing really bad, but I hope this is helping kind of understand what you have to do to mock this up properly. I want to see this exhaust lineup for this video, but I also want to have this motor pretty close to where it's going to be just to see how this is going to mock up. So, all right, so my rubber coupler boot's back in, slid into place. It's causing a little bit of downward torque on that coupler right now as we speak, but that'll give us a close enough alignment example of where this thing's going to sit. I just have no idea where I need to turn the pipe, so let's throw an exhaust in there. All right, the initial mock-up looks like if you have that rubber boot, I can't really see this, but if you have this basically where you think it's going to be, if you have that rubber boot configured so that the bottom lip of it basically touches your rear of the motor with a little bit of compression there, this looks like it's going to be a pretty close location. I think what's going to happen is when the exhaust mounts, this boot is actually going to get pushed away a little bit by this being properly mounted. Okay, and there you go. That's going to have to be good enough to kind of demonstrate dry run here how this is going to go. So the exhaust is a little bit on the low side right now. It's probably about 2 inches to 3 inches too low, but there is so much play and flexibility in this exhaust pipe, this part right here. It's going to flex and give you exactly what you want when you crank it down inside there, it's just going to bend the pipe a little bit. But it's plenty pliable for that, so it's going to give a real nice mount when it's all said and done and this thing is all raised up into place. Hopefully that long ass winded video is going to help somebody else here in the future. Thanks, Kevin, for the idea. That's a great idea.